As Jesus sat with his disciples during the Last Supper, he knew his time with them was short. With only a few hours left, he carefully chose his final parting lesson: greater love. Yet there is a deeper meaning to the Savior's teachings on love. In the ancient Greek world, love was a complex concept, with philosophers like Plato and Aristotle exploring what they saw as the true meaning of love. But in the Gospel of John, Jesus settles the debate once and for all. Let's take a closer look at Jesus' example and teachings on greater love, and see how if we truly lived it, his love would change the world. To understand Jesus' greater love, we must recognize how the Gospel of John, originally written in ancient Greek, speaks about love differently than we do today. In English, we use the same word, love, whether we're talking about love between friends, spouses, or parents and children. But we instinctively know the difference. Ancient Greek, however, captures these differences with specific words, though they are often translated as love in English. Let's explore three Greek forms of love: eros, philia, and agape. Philosophers like Plato, Aristotle, and Socrates debated these terms, seeking to define love's purest form. So when Jesus taught about greater love, he entered into an old philosophical debate, redefining love in a way that would revolutionize the world. In his ancient text Symposium, Plato presents Socrates lecturing on eros by describing the ladder of love. At its lowest levels, eros is driven by physical attraction, but as one ascends the ladder, eros becomes more refined, maturing to an appreciation of beauty itself, beyond physical form. Socrates also criticizes self-sacrifice, believing it's motivated by vainglory rather than true selflessness. Aristotle, in his Nicomachean Ethics, describes another form of love with philia, as in Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love. He defines philia as mutual goodwill, reaching its purest form in what he calls perfect friendship. Biblical examples of true philia could include David and Jonathan's friendship, or the devotion between Ruth and Naomi. But in the Gospel of John, Jesus taught greater love, using a different Greek word, agape. Thus, he transcended these debates and defined greater love once and for all. Jesus' Last Supper discourse in John 13 through 15 is the pinnacle of his teachings on love. Only one other moment comes close: John 21, the capstone of the gospel. Throughout the Last Supper, Jesus used just one Greek word 23 times to describe his love, agape. He did not speak of Socrates' eros, the love of true beauty, nor philia, the perfect friendship of Aristotle. Instead, Jesus donned the philosopher robes and defined love's highest form. Greater love hath no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends. For Jesus, selfless sacrifice is the ultimate expression of his unconditional love, or agape. And as the perfect exemplar, the Savior would show his disciples what greater love looked like the very next day. Perhaps overwhelmed by love, Peter boldly declared that he would follow Jesus anywhere, even laying down his life. But Jesus knew the truth. Before the night was over, Peter would have that very chance, and instead would deny him 3 times. But if we look closer at the Savior's teaching on greater love, we find Peter at its very heart. Here Jesus cites Peter's claim that he could lay down his life, and here he defines agape as the highest form of love, foreshadowing Peter's redemption from that very failure through the Lord's great love. Still, Peter's failure is not the end of his story. He would one day be forgiven of his weakness and given another opportunity to prove his love for the Savior. Following the Last Supper, Jesus was betrayed and arrested in Gethsemane. Peter followed at a distance, hoping to help in some way. But soon the high priest's slave began questioning him, certain he was a follower of Jesus. Fearing he might share Jesus' fate, Peter swore 3 times, "I don't know the man." Immediately, a rooster crowed. Peter recalled the Master's words spoken just hours earlier. "Before the cock crows, you will have denied me 3 times." And so Peter wept. Perhaps Peter had not quite understood the Savior's teachings on greater love, yet Jesus perfectly understood his role given by the Father. He humbly and willingly did what Peter could not. He alone suffered in Gethsemane, submitting to the Father's will. He alone walked to Golgotha, and in his crucifixion we find the perfect example of agape. As he was lifted upon the cross, he laid down his life for his friends, for us, for everyone. The Savior didn't just define greater love, he embodied it. Following Jesus' resurrection, Peter and the disciples are back home, sharing breakfast with the Lord on the shores of Galilee. Here, Jesus turns to Peter and asks him 3 times, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" 3 times Peter affirms that yes, he does love the Savior. Most scholars agree that this thrice repeated question, "Do you love me?" mirrors Peter's 3-fold denial, offering both forgiveness and restoration as the rock of Christ's church. However, scholars are less certain how to interpret love in this exchange, for hidden beneath the English translation are 2 familiar Greek words, agape and philia. The first time Jesus asks, "Do you love me?" he uses agape, the same word he used during his Last Supper discourse. But when Peter responds, "You know that I love you," he does not match Jesus' agape, but instead uses philia. The Savior asks again with agape, and once again Peter answers with philia. Yet the third and final time, Jesus shifts. "Do you love me?" Now using Peter's philia. Finally, Peter matches him, replying, "You know that I love you." It's difficult to say exactly what this shift in language means, but perhaps Jesus was reminding Peter of his teaching on love, calling Peter to a greater love, agape. And Peter, humbled by his weakness, and now forgiven by the resurrected Christ, lacked the confidence to fully answer the call. Yet, in his mercy and perfect understanding, the Lord meets Peter where he is, just as he meets us in our weakness. Now, with Peter forgiven and restored as chief apostle, Christ issued a command. He does not call Peter to lay down his life. No, that was the Savior's task alone, one only the Messiah could accomplish. Instead, Jesus commands Peter and all of us to feed his lambs and tend his sheep, to lay down our lives in discipleship, living the gospel, keeping his commandments, and loving others as the Savior loves us. Jesus' greater love was not just about his death. He laid down his life in how he lived. He sacrificed his time, his will, and his very life to the Father. He set aside his own plans to help those in need, comforting Mary and Martha when Lazarus died, or dropping everything when Jairus begged him to heal his daughter. The Savior does not hold his life as his own. He constantly sets it aside for us because of his greater love. While his love is perfect, we surely fail many times to show our love for him. But failure is not the end. Just as Peter failed to fulfill his promise to lay down his life, Jesus' greater love became the catalyst for Peter's redemption and for ours. The greater love that brings true joy and salvation is not found in the philosophies of men. It is found in the life and teachings of the greatest one to ever love. If we desire the divine love that promises saving joy, we must follow him through obedience to his commandments and studying the life he lived. As we celebrate the life, death, and resurrection of the living Christ, his voice calls to us once again, "Do you love me?" And having taken upon him his name as his modern disciples, we must never turn away until the greater love of the Savior floods the world, his love he shared with us.